Peace to you. Today is Lesson 5, under the chapter called The Emergence of Israel, and the subheading, The State of Israel. Page 448, for those of you who wish to know more in detail, I suggest, first let's start by pronouncing the word. I grew up with hearing the word, the State of Israel, Israel with a Z. And I thought, why is it pronounced Israel? Please could someone inform me on my YouTube channel or on my Facebook page? Because we say Israel. And in Islam, we know the 12 tribes of Israel. And we know that it means those who fight in the path of Allah. Literally, the word Israel, that's what it means. So bear that in mind, and keep also in mind the question of the meaning of Israel with a Z, and what's the difference between the tribe of Israel, or the sons of Israel, and the Jews. In Arabic, we say Yahud, and there is a distinction in Arabic, which is why you'll have a hard time trying to learn Arabic anywhere in America. You'll have to resort to YouTube videos, which is better than nothing. And that was deliberate. But let's get on to what I consider to be a very accurate portrayal here. And I am doing this in the complete essence, inshallah, of bringing forth the truth in a fair and moderate manner for peace. Let us begin. Page 448. Out of this turmoil of 1946 to 1947, the state of Israel was born. Coincidentally, that was the year I was born, 1947. The events are too recent to require extensive recital here. Most contemporaries will remember the formation of the Anglo-American Commission of Inquiry, its extensive and noteworthy hearings, its final recommendations, and ultimately the debates at the UN. Finally came that crowning achievement, the UN resolution of November 1947 to partition Palestine between a Jewish and an Arab state, with an international enclave in Jerusalem. Weary of her mandate, Britain announced that, come what may, her troops would evacuate Palestine on May 15, 1948. Obviously, Ernest Bevin, Britain's implacably anti-Zionist foreign minister, hoped that in the free-for-all that would follow this withdrawal, the armies of the 7 Arab states would easily overcome the Yashub. The 6 months which elapsed from the time of the UN's decisions to the British evacuation were a period of feverish activity for the Jews in Palestine and abroad. Despite the frequent vagaries of American foreign policy, which during the war produced the Roosevelt-Ibn Saud understanding. Isn't that quaint, understanding? And in the spring of 1948 seemed to lead to the abandonment of the UN resolution. This country remained the Yashub's staunchest supporter. The Soviet Union, which in November 1947 voted for the Palestine Revolution, was still bent primarily on getting Britain out of the country. But when in May 1948, the hour of decision struck, the Yashub found itself alone in confronting the array of Arab armies. Undaunted, it immediately proclaimed its independence, and on its very first day was formally recognized by President Truman. The intervention of the Security Council led to the first ceasefire, which helped alleviate the position of besieged Jewish Jerusalem. The second ceasefire, however, imposed by the Council under severe sanctions, was entirely to the advantage of the Arab armies, which were thus saved from almost total annihilation. Even today, many Israelis, especially of the Harut faction, believed that the ceasefire order should have been rejected and all Arab troops expelled from Palestine on both sides of the Jordan. Strategically feasible, such an overt defiance of the Security Council would undoubtedly have led to severe reprisals. Those were the good old days. A defiance of the Security Council would lead to severe reprisals. That was then, this is now. 8 years of Israeli independence are hardly enough to provide an historical perspective. The formative years of any new state are always years of flux. And there is the complication in Israel of the unfinished business of the peace treaty. The state enjoys de jure recognition by most of the world's nations, though by none of its immediate neighbors. It required great ingenuity and effort on the part of the United Nations Representative Ralph Bunche to secure by separate negotiations with the Arab states and Israel even the present uneasy truce. Iraq is not even a signatory to the Armistice Pact. Egypt is still blockading Israel and refuses transit through the Suez Canal to any cargo destined for Israel. Interventions by the great powers and censures by the Security Council have thus far remained without avail. The Arab countries always maintain an economic boycott of Israel, even to their own disadvantage, since they would normally export more goods to the new country than they would buy from it. Besides all this is the festering wound of the Arab refugee problem. The mass psychosis was generated by the Arab leaders, who advised their compatriots to leave, promising them a speedy, victorious return. The promise never materialized. The number of actual refugees is controversial. The official list of the UN Refugee Organization now count as more than 900,000. But this number includes many local residents who succeeded in insinuating themselves into the relief roles. While all births are speedily recorded, deaths are often unreported for months, even years, because the families benefit from the increased dole. Were logic alone to determine the course of human affairs, the Arab refugee problem could be settled very quickly. Iraq and Syria are crying out for additional settlers. Iraq's cultivable area is even now used only to the extent of 1/5 or 1/4. With irrigation of the long-neglected lands, this country, it has been estimated, could readily accommodate more than 3 million immigrants. Such a mass immigration of Palestinian Arabs akin in language, culture, and religion would greatly benefit both the newcomers and the country at large, assuming that there are no ties to the Palestinian land. It's just, and now there are cries for the homeland, for the dispossessed Jews of 2,000 years ago, and now they're actually making this comparison that the Palestinians would be happy in Iraq. Readmission of any substantial number of refugees by Israel would be suicidal. These refugees do not conceal their deep hostility and hope that a second round would end in Israel's complete defeat. What it would mean if Israel agreed to the suggestion that it should admit 200,000 refugees for the sake of goodwill and peace must be appreciated through a comparison. It would be like suggesting to the American government that for the sake of goodwill and peace, it open the gates to the influx of 20 million Chinese communists. This is absurd. We're talking about Chinese coming back to America. Up until now, I felt that this author, Salo Baran, was, never mind. We have to be nice. Even then, the United States, separated from China by the Pacific Ocean, would be far less endangered than Israel, which is surrounded on all sides except the sea by Arab nations. On the other hand, the state of mind among the Arabs is such that, to quote an informed British observer, any Arab statesman who recommended the resettlement of refugees away from their present concentration would be immediately assassinated. Oh my, that's a bit much. Freedom of speech. Many persons also expressed concern about the present frontiers of Israel. From a strategic as well as an economic point of view, these frontiers obviously leave much to be desired. A mere glance at the map will show that the Tulkarem Triangle juts out into Israel's territory to a distance of some 20 miles from the sea. Here, Israel's area could be quickly cut in half, separating Galilee and the northern coast from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Oh, you mean similar what you did with Pakistan? Oh, never mind. They're at it again. I mean, this is like an old story, especially when the British are involved. Yet one must bear in mind that with the exception of the brief periods under David, Solomon, and Alexander Jannaeus, neither the first nor second Commonwealth ever had clearly defined or strategically easily defensible borders. That's a bad grammatical sentence. Let's try this one again. Yet one must bear in mind that, with the exception of the brief periods under David, Solomon, Alexander, Jannaeus, neither the first nor the second Commonwealth ever had clearly defined or strategically, this is where it's a problem, easily defensible boundaries. Oh, well, he's not a native speaker. Still, both managed to stave off all invasions by neighbors and surrendered only to the overwhelming power of such distant empires as Assyria, Babylonia, and Rome. No other boundaries would have proved more defensible against these imperial overlords. A genuine international guarantee of the existing frontiers would therefore help to remove one of the gravest sources of apprehension and even domestic party strife. There is still the unfinished business of a written constitution. A very eloquent draft was prepared by the international jurist Leo Cohn and his associates soon after the proclamation of independence. From the point of view of style and high ethical standards, it is a pity that it did not become the law of the land. From the outset, however, objections were raised in principle and also with regard to individual provisions. The religious bloc parties in particular insisted that Israel needed no other constitution than its God-given Torah. Israel is managing, therefore, with a series of fundamental laws adopted ad hoc, as needed, Of course, countries can live with unwritten constitutions, as had Great Britain for many centuries past. Israel's main task now is to fuse its underlying, historically diverse legal systems. Its legal structure is still dominated in part by modified traditions of Turkish law and consists also of important innovations introduced by the British mandatory legislation, largely in consonance with Anglo-American legal principles. Oh my, how do these Orthodox even cope with such a thing? At the same time, the people are trying to revert to the teachings of the Bible, Talmud, and the rest of Jewish law, as it operated through centuries of Jewish communal autonomy. To merge these diffuse elements into a single legal structure would be difficult. It would be difficult enough even if Israel's population had not come from so many countries with so many diverse legal traditions and mores. Most of the Israeli lawyers are graduates of Central or Eastern European law schools, and so place great emphasis on Roman and Teuton law, which differs radically from the earlier Turkish and Anglo-American elements. Yet the country's legal profession, especially its judiciary, has admirably handled a difficult situation, and a new legal structure, workable if not always self-consistent, in gradually emerging from the juristic Babel. You know, it's interesting, this word Babel as used, in referring to ancient Iraq, and the word Babylon, etc. If you look at the root meaning in Maqayis ibn Faris, the oldest extant dictionary we have of any real weight, it means a sort of a language that's incomprehensible. Balbala. Interesting. You've heard the word the babbling brook. Babies babbling. Well, that's the root in Arabic. Back to history. I'd prefer really to stay into the Arabic, but this is important. It's Passover. We need to know these things. We need to know for the first time, and the Jewish quote-unquote whatevers need to ponder, stop and think, repent. Similarly, the complex party system, which has aroused concern among sympathetic observers, has thus far operated in a fairly satisfactory fashion. Predictions were often heard that Israel would follow the checkered career of the French Parliament and its short-lived cabinets. What even a world power like France could ill afford might prove disastrous to a struggling new country of Israel's size. In practice, however, the government of Israel has shown a remarkable stability. Throughout the 8 years of its national existence, indeed, during the preceding 2 decades of its fairly effective self-government, the Jewish national home has been ruled by the same party, Mapai, and even by the same statesmen, whether in combination with the general Zionism or with the religious bloc. Such labor leaders as Ben-Gurion and Ben-Zvi were in charge of the main branches of the administration and the old National Council. Just as they have... Wait a minute, I have to move the camera. I'm out here in the sunshine,